The American Civil War fought in the United States from 1861 to 1865 between the North, the Union, and the South, or the Confederacy. The reason for the war was pinned on slavery. On the 34 U.S. states in February 1861, 7 southern slave states were declared by partisans to have seceded from the country, and a Confederate States of America was organized in rebellion against the U.S. constitutional government. The Confederacy grew to control at least a majority of territory in 11 states. Hostilities began on April 12, 1861, when Confederate forces fired upon Fort Sumter. In 1863, with the advancement of Robert E. Lee's Confederate incursions, it ended at the Battle of Gettysburg. The Battle of Gettysburg was fought July 1st to July 3rd in 1863. The battle involved the largest number of casualties of the entire war and is often described as the war's turning point. Union Major General George Meade's Army of the Potomac defeated attacks by Confederate General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, halting Lee's invasion of the North. On the second day of battle, most of both armies had assembled. The Union line was laid out in a defensive formation resembling a fishhook. In the late afternoon of July 2nd, Lee launched a heavy assault on the Union left flank, and fierce fighting broke out at Little Round Top, the Wheat Field, Devil's Den, and the Peach Orchard. On the Union right, Confederate demonstrations escalated into full-scale attacks on Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill. All across the battlefield, despite significant losses, the Union defenders held their lines. On the third day of battle, fighting resumed on Culp's Hill and cavalry battles raged to the east and south. But the main event was a dramatic infantry assault by 12,500 Confederates against the center of the Union line on Cemetery Hill, known as the Pickett's Charge. The charge was repulsed by Union rifle and artillery fire at great loss to the Confederate Army. Western successes led to Ulysses S. Grant's command of all Union armies in 1864, inflicting an ever-tightening naval blockade of Confederate ports. The Union marshaled the resources and manpower to attack the Confederacy from all directions and limit their supply chain. Robert Lee surrendered, and the Union prevailed. There were 72 medals of honor awarded for the Gettysburg campaign. On November 19th, President Lincoln used the dedication ceremony for the Gettysburg National Cemetery to honor the fallen Union soldiers and redefine the purpose of the war in his historic Gettysburg address.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate We cannot consecrate. We cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here. But it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. And that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.